anyone who's never had a major loss cannot fathom that it's not just the loss of the person.
Right.
It's all of these other little secondary losses and just everything else that, like you say, that they're going to miss out on,
Right.
that they're never going to be able to witness.
Right.
But no one who has ever been through that can imagine. I guess they think that, well, you lose the person, you have the funeral, and then life goes on.
Yeah.
And it's not like that. It's like I was talking to a friend who I went to high school with, and she and I were talking about how, you know, everybody thinks or everybody wants you to get back to normal.
Yeah.
But that normal is gone.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, you're a different person. That is completely gone. You're not going to get back to that. And I can hear that in talking with you now and in how what your normal was before and then whatever life is now. Yeah.
Well, and my life is like divided, right? Because there's definitely a time like before Marc died and after Marc died. Like that was a definite slice in time.
Right.
Then there's that middle part between Marc died and before my brother died. There's that part. And then there's after my brother died where I dealt with the loss of both of them forward. And then I somewhat grieved my relationship even with Christian, because you work so hard to make your kid have wings and fly, and then they have wings and they fly, and you're like, what am I supposed to do now? Who am I? What do I actually want to do with this life? How do I make myself, like, what is my cause now? You know? So there was so much of that. And I think too, I was angry. I remember like very clearly walking into the gas station on the way out to the cemetery not long after Marc had died. And I walked in to get something to drink. And people were normal. The cashier was talking to a guy at the register about how so-and-so, there was somebody buying a paper, like people were laughing. And I was irate. My world had stopped, not only stopped, crumbled, shattered into an infinite number of pieces. Nothing about the world was okay. Yet everything was going on. And I'm like, do you guys not know about Marc? Do I need to tell you about my, like, you know what happened, right? But it just made me angry.
You want to wear a big sign that explains what's going on.
Right.
So that other people will stop acting normal. And so that you feel some, I don't know what, so that it's almost like you want them to be included in your grief and in what's going on. Like, hey, can you stop acting like everything is okay, because it's not.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I mean, it makes no sense, right? It makes absolutely no sense.
No.
So being somebody that's been through grief, like I would never wish that on another person.
Right.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, you're like, it's never going to be okay. You know, it's never going to be okay. And I think grief would be so much easier to deal with if you could, you know, check off each stage of the stages of grief and then move it along and figure it out. But it just doesn't work like that. I think that Christian grieves in different ways. The older he gets, the more that he can understand and that kind of stuff. So that's always very interesting for me as his mom to kind of help him through that kind of grief as he matures. But, you know, I'm 18 years out and there are still days that will knock me off my feet. There are days when I am emotionally paralyzed. There are days when I will go through and just do what I have to do to get to the next day. You know, it's just, you learn to carry it. It's always kind of heavy, but some days you have the strength to do it and some days you don't. I think for me too, especially now, the more I get okay with the mental part of this, physically, every time it turns March on the calendar, my body goes into a trauma response. I was just talking to my psychiatrist about this because I'm like, how do I reprogram myself to be like, we're okay. You know, you don't have to freak out. We're okay. We've done this. We're okay. But physically, I am not there yet. Physically, I start the headaches. I get super tired. I will clench my jaws 24/7, not just once in a while, 24/7.
Isn't it interesting how the body remembers the traumas? Yes. Your brain can, you know, reprogram, but the body remembers it.
Physically, I cannot fix it. No matter how good I feel mentally, I will be on the verge of like panic attack, anxiety attack kind of feeling. for the entire month until I get through, and it flips to April.
Because his birthday is also in March.
His birthday is in March, yes, and his anniversary is in March, and then the gathering will be in March, so we'll travel a little bit in there and that kind of stuff. But yes, March is the month for me that's really, really hard. But physically, it is physically my brother's anniversary doesn't bother me in the same way, even, but Mark's does. Mark's triggers the physical part that I cannot retrain myself to get over quite yet. I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
It's interesting. So Dave and I, we talk a lot about time and about how I've described
Doesn't
it.
exist in grief.
No, and again, unless you've been through it, you cannot understand the time concept of how my mom's been gone 6 years, my dad's been gone 5 years, but yet to me, it's like it was, just last week, or it's like I'm just right back there, and everything that's happened in between doesn't exist. Right. It's so strange that, again, unless you've been through it, you can't comprehend
But
it.
I also feel like there are days that I feel like it happened 10 minutes ago and I can feel it almost, There are days that I feel like it's been so long I can't remember the way he sounds, or I can't remember a laugh, or I can't remember this, or I can't, and I'll freak out about that, right? And I think COVID too made that so much worse because time became nonsense during COVID, right?
Yeah.
So even now to think back to like 2019 or whatever, like it shouldn't just be that long,
Right.
There was no time then either. So I think that made it worse almost, But yeah, time is a very, very strange concept in the middle of
and like you say too, like how I feel about it is that I feel like, to me, the best way I've been able to describe it is like I'm in a parallel universe.
Yeah.
Like I was picked up out of mine, and then, like you say, I was dropped over here, and everything's kind of the same, but it's kind of not. But my people aren't here.
Right.
And it's surreal. That's how I can describe it. It's just surreal to be here, knowing that somebody else is supposed to be here with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that because I focused so much on being what I needed to be for other people, which I have zero regrets about. I would absolutely do again. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But in the same breath, that strength also made me kind of mute. Like, I feel like people look at me like, how can you be so strong? How can, my niece, we talked to my niece. She's like, hey, Feather, I don't understand. How do you do it? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, like when things happen that are really bad, I couldn't do it. You just boss up and handle it, And I'm like, yeah, because I don't really have any other choice. And I guess, yes, I do have a choice. I guess I could lay in bed and not do anything, but you can't. I had an 8-year-old when Marc died that was looking to me to see how we were feeling. You know what I mean? Like I had to be okay. And I think because everybody views you with such strength, like now when I feel like I'm screaming at the top of my lungs for help, it's like I'm muted and people can't hear me. Right.
Yep.
So at the same time, then I'm like, okay, well, we've kind of screamed and nobody hears you. So now we have to go back to figuring it out on our own again. And it's really easy to fall into that cycle of trying to figure it out and then throwing yourself into whatever makes you happy at that time and that kind of thing to get through that part. One of my very best friends, I almost lost to suicide a little over a year and a half ago. And I think that was the moment that I realized that even the people that you never thought, like the strongest people, you never thought he or she would be in that situation, more or less that far down the road in that situation. And I think that's the day that has slapped me in the face that you almost have to check on your strong people as much or more than you check on your people that need you,
Yeah.
And I mean, I really, really felt that to my core because I struggled a long time with, why did I not see it? Did I not do something? Did I not see something? But I do the same thing with me. Like, how did we get to this dark place? You know what I mean? Like I did all the things, like I did all the things that I knew were in my toolbox and that kind of stuff. But there have definitely been times along my journey where I'm like, I've used up all the tools I have. I don't know what else to do. Nothing is fixing it or even like just bumping me up the ladder a little bit. Like I just cannot get off the bottom. And those times are hard. They're dark, they're scary, and they really suck. Those are the times that I'm like, okay, like we finally hit a point where we have to bring in somebody else now. We have to figure out how to fix this, how to get us back to even footing, that kind of stuff. And most of the time I try to do it by myself. Even though I know logically like it makes sense to me. I know I'm not supposed to do that, but I don't want to be a burden to anybody else. I don't want if you're happy right now, I don't want to tell you about my stuff to make you sad, right?
Right.
Like I don't want to bring that up. And like I said, life happens, right?
Well, and because the minute you start acting strong, the minute you start putting that out there, like, hey, I'm having a good day or what, people think you've moved on. People
Right.
think, oh, hey, everything's okay. She's doing all right.
She's
I don't
fine.
need to check in with her anymore.
Right.
That's been eye-opening to me. Like the number of people who I thought would
Oh,
check in
yeah.
or I thought would be there
Humbling, right?
and weren't. I
Yeah.
mean, I lost not just friends, but I lost some family members because of that.
Yeah.
That I just don't really speak with anymore because of either things that were said or things that weren't said
Right.
during that time.
It's definitely eye-opening. It's disappointing a lot of time. A lot of people that I never in a million years would have thought would have been by my side absolutely were. And the people that I thought weren't. I did have a ton of support. I'm super grateful for the support I did have. But yeah, it's really eye-opening. And even now, like when you're like, hey, I really need to talk or I'm not doing very well or whatever, some people blow it off. And I'm like, if I've gotten to the point where I need to say it out loud, we're probably already in trouble. Like we're already down pretty low on the ladder here. And it's quite humbling to see the relationships that you thought were stronger that turn out to be not as strong as you thought. But like I said, there's also those people that I never thought in a million years would be some of my very best friends that are. So,
Right.
works both ways for sure. But yeah, it's, it's hard,
Yeah.
and like I said, grief, you don't just check the boxes and move on. Right. So you still carry it around and like, sometimes I don't want people to know I still carry it around. It's just easier if I just keep it close to
Mhm.
the chest and move on, and that's what you do, but, I mean, I'm not saying that's right.
After especially after my dad died, so I'd already lost my mom and then I lost my dad. And of course, he didn't pass away from COVID, but he died at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
So it uh, that was like you say, that was just a weird time anyway. Time was weird during COVID. People were weird during COVID.
Mm.
But
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
but you were by yourself during COVID, right?
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, so was I. So you're in a house that's your parents' house that is a complete reminder of everything that has to do with your parents, and you're by yourself. So
And my dad would not let me move or touch anything of mom's who had died
oh,
14 months previously. So like all of her stuff was still, and again, you talk about it being like Marc was just deployed. It was literally like mom and dad had gone on a trip
yeah.
because all of their stuff was still here untouched. And like their coats were where they left them. Like their shoes were where they left them. It was the eeriest thing. And for the longest, it took me so long because I would just sit there and just think, well, they'll be back. Like, they're coming back, right? I was so terrified to move anything because my mom was very particular about where things were in the house. I was so terrified to like move anything because I would worry that mom would get mad. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
no, she's not gonna get mad. But it's yeah, like you cannot get that's where I was going. You cannot get your brain wrapped around that because you talk about grief is not you can't check the stages off. It's which I kind of hate those stages anyway because it's not linear.
No.
You don't go through it like that. You go backwards and forwards. People think, oh, once you move through anger, once you move through, that you're done.
Yeah.
And you're not. Even if you get to acceptance, you're still like, you
Yeah.
still don't even really get to acceptance.
There's
I
no
don't
finish
think.
line. Yeah.
Yeah. You just start back at the beginning
Mhm.
or, go back to the midpoint.
COVID too was hard though, because it was like, I live by myself, right? And I'm good at living by myself. Me and my dogs, we're good, right?
Me too.
No problem. Non-COVID, no problem. I could still go outside. I could see the neighbors. I can see my friends. I can do all the things. But when COVID hit, I have never felt isolation like I did then. I didn't know, the year we did the gathering on the Zoom call, right? One of Marc's Marines lived up the road, not too far, and he surprised me at my front door and brought me flowers, right? And he was not scared to hug me, even though it was during COVID. And he and his wife both, like, I hugged both of them. And it was completely overwhelming because I didn't realize how much I missed physical touch or speaking to somebody that wasn't scared to be 6 feet from me or, all the things that you had. It was so isolating though.
Well, and at the time, I mean, I think we forget this, but during COVID, there was also no insight to COVID at the time. Like, we didn't know when, there was no finish line for that. Like, people weren't saying, oh, well, in 3 months you can do this, or in 6 months you can. There was we didn't know how long it was going to be. So the thought of, when am I going to hug this person again? When am I going to see this person again? When am I going to, because we could only do graveside services for my dad. And like, a lot of people didn't want to hug you at the funeral. They didn't want to, you wanted to maintain.
Or didn't come, right? Yeah.
They didn't come.
When at the gathering, right? Yeah.
And then afterwards, I had people get mad at me for not having a proper funeral for my dad. And I'm like, I couldn't. Like, what do you want me to do?
It wasn't a choice.
Right. But they think that it was a choice. So that's, again, that goes back to being disappointed by people. And
I mean, well, I couldn't go home. I felt like if I traveled to my parents that I might make them sick, and I didn't want to do that.
Right.
Like, I felt like I wanted to escape it kind of and be around people, but I couldn't get there. That part was the isolation part of COVID was probably the hardest part of COVID for me.
Definitely.
That was a very, very hard time. I did not love them.
No.
It was an interesting time for sure. But yeah, I'm glad that, I don't know, there's pieces of me that are glad that I had to go through some of the things that I've been through, because without it, I wouldn't be here today, right? I wouldn't be the same person. I just read this book called The Midnight Library, and it's about this woman who essentially is very unhappy with life. And she goes to this library when she's between life and death, and she can relive different things and make different choices, right? So if you can make different choices, would you still have regrets? Would you still do that kind of thing?
Right.
And I thought it was kind of fascinating to sit and think about, because would I really change anything? And I'm not really sure that the answer to that is yes, I would have changed a lot. I feel like I did the best that I could with what I had at the time. When I knew better, I did better. I did whatever my heart needed in that moment. And that's still to this day what I tell other people. Do whatever your heart needs. Like, maybe somebody doesn't understand, or, my dad does not grieve in the same way that I did. He was very much pack it up and moving on. And my mom figured out how to kind of mold to that. I never did. That's not how I deal with things. So it was interesting trying to mesh our different feelings, both let each other kind of respect each other's grief and journey.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, right? There are days, like I said, that I'm going to make it 5 more minutes, and I'm going to do another 5 minutes, and then I'm going to do an hour, and we're going to keep moving, And then there's days that I'm like, I'm not doing anything today. I'll go walk the dogs because I need to walk the dogs. We're in snuggle mode all day. I'm not doing anything, And then there's days that I have to stay absolutely busy. But there's days that things start to bother me, and Memorial Day last year, my house used to be covered in pictures. Every space of the wall had pictures all over it. Memorial Day last year, I had kind of a mini fit. And I took all the pictures down. I got rid of big furniture, like all the things that I had. I, in my journey, have put memories and things onto inanimate objects, right? So I can't get rid of this chair because I bought that with my brother. I don't need this chair. I never sit in this chair. but I bought it with my brother. You know what I mean? So I can't get rid of that without losing a piece of him. Logically, I get it. Crazy. Get rid of the chair. Physically, you can't do it. You know, still have the chair.
Oh, I understand.
You know, I remember you talking a little bit about how it was to clean out the house after your parents died. And
Which I'm still doing. Yeah.
Christian is going to be you, right? Because I have all of these things, and like Christian's going to come in and be like, I want this, this, and this. Everything else can go, you know? And it is so hard to get rid of things for me. I'm like, you still have the memory. There are pictures, there are, you know, all the things. Right. Like, this is going to be okay. So I am either black or white. I am either hold on to everything, do not get rid of a single thing, or I have these mini fits where I'm like, everything has to go. It needs to be completely different. It has to change. I can't be surrounded by it anymore. Like, I feel like I'm drowning again. And when I get there, I'm like, okay, like, we got to get ready to go and get rid of all this stuff. And it's just, there's no middle, you know? And like I said, I'm 18 years out. We've been on this for 18 years. So I'm like, this is just how my life goes. You know, this is just this,
well,
you know.
I'll tell you, I actually have some stuff that Marc gave me when I was in high school. And I have a flannel. Of course, we were in high school in the 90s. So I have a flannel shirt that belonged to him. Very grunge. And we were doing community theater together. And he was the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. Yep. And I was Jade, the Emerald City Maid. And yeah, I mean, we used to hang out a lot. I really got to know him really well. I was about 14. And so he was probably 17. Had to have been 17. Yeah, because he was driving, which my mom liked, by the way, that she didn't have to drive me. To just pick me up and drive me and drop me off places. But I mean, Marc was so easy to talk to. I mean, you know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Marc was so easy to talk to, but even at 14 and 17, we could have the most intellectual and deep conversations.
Oh, yeah.
And what I loved about him is that he could just make me feel so comfortable about talking about anything.
Yeah.
We would talk about,
that's why I said the good, the bad, the ugly, embarrassing, the disgusting, like whatever it is.
Yeah. He was like, let's talk about it. And religion, politics, like we would talk about it all.
Some of my favorite conversations with him were at 2 a.m. in the Waffle House. Like, you know, just sitting there, we would fix all the problems of the world, every single one. And you touch on every single one, you know. Yeah.
We would sit in his car. Was it like a Geo Metro? It was like a little 2-door something. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Anyway, but we would sit in the parking lot and just talk. Yeah. Or go get food or something and just sit and just talk. And but yeah, he gave me one of his flannel shirts because I was cold one day and I at community theater at practice, and I tried to give it back to him and he's like, "No, you keep it." And I have kept it ever since. In fact, it's folded up and it's in a trunk that I have. It's in my bedroom. And it's one that I will never get rid of it. Yeah. I also have Marc always tried to enlighten me on my music. You know, he would always give me music recommendations. And I still have, and they have been in every car that I've ever had, I still have the 3 Jimmy Buffett cassette tapes that he gave me. When I was about 15, he's like, you need to listen to other music. And so he gave me these Jimmy Buffett cassette tapes, and they have traveled every car that I've had since high school. I don't have a cassette player in my car right now, but they're in my car. Yeah. So it's those little pieces. I mean, it's some things I can get rid of, but little things like that. Yeah. I can't. Whoever comes along after me will just toss all of this. Yeah. Because it won't mean the same. It won't mean anything. Yeah. Yeah. But I just a whole trunk of like letters that mean something to me, or, you know, like I'm a sucker for a handwritten letter. Right. So like
when I get those, like they go in the box, right? And like, but I think too, like once you've gone through grief, right? Like I love pictures. I've always loved pictures. I've always been the picture taker,
Right.
and I'm glad that I am, because I have all these pictures. I have all these moments. I have all these things. But at the same time, I have all these pictures and I have all these things. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
so it's kind of a double-edged sword,
Yeah. And like, how do you explain to the next generation or whoever the importance of this?
Yeah.
Because I remember like my mom or my great aunt or whoever talking to me about
Right.
the thing, but I think too, I mean, like you say, like about a chair, like my mom wanted to leave my nephew this chair that belonged to her grandfather, my great grandfather, his great great grandfather. And so when it came time, I'm like, do you want this chair? He's like, I don't want this chair. He's like, why would I want this chair? But mom left it to him because he liked to sit in it when he was a little kid. And
Right.
this chair is hideous. I don't want this chair.
Right.
So now I have the chair. I don't want the chair. Because I don't want to get a chair.
So you must then keep the chair, right?
It's like, yeah. And so but you know what? That's another layer of the grief.
Yeah.
Because I get angry at mom. I'm like, why didn't you ask him this, beforehand when you were writing out your will? Why didn't you ask him, hey,
Yeah.
do you want this chair? Because it's another layer of the grief for me on top of everything else that I have to deal with.
Yeah. I get that. When Marc, before he deployed the first time, right? Of course, you have to talk about all the things that could happen and what you want done and who receives your body when it comes back to the States and how do you want this and that. And we were having those conversations at 21, 22, like,
Right.
so I've thought about death, I guess, since an early age because of that. But then, like, when my brother died, I never talked to my brother about what he wanted when he died because he wasn't going to die anytime soon.
Right.
Now, with my parents, like, I know every single detail. There's times that I'm like, can we not talk about it? Like, I don't want to do that right now. But I'm grateful that I know all the details, so I'm not freaked out when that time comes. I will be, even though you prepare as much as you can, but you're never prepared, right? So I don't know. I think it's a good thing to talk about, but it's also not fun to talk about for sure.
No, no, not at all. And after mom and dad died and they left me this house, I had to go, and of course we were trying to settle accounts and all that. And so I had to go and talk to their financial advisor. And he starts asking me, he's like, so do you have a will? I'm like, no. He's like, do you have, and he starts going down this list. I'm like, no. I mean, I was 39 when, I was 39 when my dad died. And they're like, you have assets now. And I'm like, and I went at the time, I was like, no, I don't. Like, I don't know. I don't like,
Open that on me.
like, I don't have assets. Adults have assets.
Right.
Like that was still my thinking. It's like, no, no, no. Other people have assets. I don't. Like, I had a dog. Like
Right.
this is my responsibility. Like, don't start throwing all of this stuff at me.
So
But
my equivalent is what happens to Christian if something happens to you?
yeah.
Oh, excellent. Because that wasn't like one of my top fears prior, right? Which it was. So now that becomes like my super fear, right? So then you can't, and then like it translates into life though, right? Because then I'm afraid, like, please let him make good decisions. Or if I text him and I haven't heard back from him in a day or two, I'm like, are you good? Like, just tell me you're good. You know what I mean? And he gets it now, like as an adult, he gets it now, but it was very hard to let go sometimes because I'm like, okay, so nothing can happen to you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure how I would survive that. Like, I can't even think about it. I can't think about losing my parents. I know that will be a very, very hard time for me. Um, I don't want to, you know, don't want to. Yet it's the one thing that you're just not going to get out of, right? It's one of the things that's guaranteed.
Did you feel after your brother died, and I'm asking you this because this is how I felt, did you feel like you were waiting for the other shoe to drop?